What's going on, Jake?
What's happening, Mark?
Another week. Tired this week. Gotta muster some energy for this one. It's been a long week, but
yeah. When we get started, though, the juices will flow.
Yeah.
But you had some deep thoughts you wanted to get into, huh?
Well, no, I mean, I was thinking about some of the things that I might bug you on text or phone and pick your brain about, but sometimes those subjects or those topics are not long enough to necessarily warrant a whole reef therapy session. Mm-hmm. And I could totally be wrong about that because I know you and I could probably talk an hour about protein skimmers alone. But I thought, well, what if we just do like an amalgamation of some of these thoughts that have been...
Freestyle.
Yeah.
Freestyle session of reef therapy. Yeah.
And I know you got some too, probably. Or
I'm here for it, but it sounds like you got some things to get off your chest. So why don't you take us off?
All right. Well, first off, I guess quick tank update. I had a close call on my UV yesterday. I typically don't run a sterilizer, but I've been in fish acquisition mode with this new tank for the last year, and it's just nice to have that insurance policy while you're adding new fish. And I don't think I have ick in my tank because I'm pretty diligent about quarantine or buying quarantine fish, but you never know. Anyway, I did some tank maintenance. I did the whole... we talked in the last episode about how my refugium was a refuge for bubble algae because I had some leftover live rock down there. So I cleaned that out, right? And what does that say?
Galleria Aquatica.
Oh, I like their YouTube channel. And
yeah, shout out to Cam and Anya.
Yeah. Speaking of, they did an episode on installing a UV just today that I saw. Anyway, back to the topic. So I like running it when I'm trying to add new fish as an insurance policy. And so it's been on for about the last year, less than a year. But when in my Apex, I've got the maintenance button, right? So it's like a soft outlet or virtual outlet, and I activate that. And when that's activated, it turns all the crap off for me, which is kind of nice, right? So I've got a button inside my stand. I press it. Everything powers down. I can go do a water change. I can work on my sump. And then I, press the button and it all turns back on. But my CJ pump that feeds the UV, the impeller must have got binded up or something. And so the UV light was on, but there was no water flowing through it. And I didn't notice that for days. And then it was last night, I was moving some stuff around in my stand and I brushed against it and it was hot. I mean, it was burning hot, that plastic.
Oh, no.
So I was like, oh, crap. So that got me kind of thinking about maybe plumbing it into my return pump because not fully in line because I want to be able to, like a manifold, because I want to be able to control the flow through it. But when your return pump isn't running, right? So I turned the pump on and I kind of held my breath because maybe something cracked or something on the inside, right? And all of a sudden water starts flowing through it again, but knock on wood, everything was okay. But yeah, that was my little scare. So got it all back together and tank looks good. So anyway, that was my small update. Any updates from your end?
I got to pull up my list real quick. I know you want to get into some automatic filter rolls, so maybe this is a good way to kick it off.
Sure.
I love my Red Sea reef mat. Here's the crazy thing. It's not even working yet. You have to initialize it with the app and everything to get it to start turning on its own. I'm sure there's a reason for that. It'd be nice if it worked out of the box without the app, like your CJ return pumps and other return pumps, they work just fine before you connect them to whatever. But even manually advancing the roll once or twice a day, I've used a ton of automatic filter rolls by now, and I've broken a few, and I've rebuilt a couple. And there's this thing that happens when the dirty spool starts to become full, like most of your roll is no longer on the new roll, it's on the empty roll. So that increases the diameter of the roll and increases the torque required. And some of the earlier models, man, those things like barely worked. They just, when they were really full, you could just hear it in the way the motor was operating, that it was kind of struggling to really advance more filtered material. And there's something about the Reef mat that just has that confidence. It's got that confidence. When you press the button, it's just like, this roll is coming through. And, you know, there's a full review coming. Obviously, I'm not using it as intended yet because I'm manually advancing it. But there's something about it being really large and really robust and like really up to the task. It's weird to say that about an aquarium device because, you know, skimmer is like alchemy and then lighting is subjective. And just that Reef mat is not in that category. It is confidently pulling that roll through. And because it uses a 200 micron mesh, it, you know, catches most of the large stuff, you know, fish poop and bits of algae or whatever. And as it clogs, it becomes a finer porosity filter. And, man, I think that's going to be the automatic filter roll to beat. And at $399, it is priced the same as the Clarisy. But when you see the features and the size and the ability, before you even consider any kind of wirelessly controllable and smart features, man, that is a great automatic filter roll.
Yeah, I only recently have experience with one. So I don't have no way to compare, but the things I do like from reading about the unit is I like the little features too of like having a carbon immediate filter on the bottom. It's just like little touches like that.
They didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
They didn't have to add a media basket on the bottom, which is your cleanest water, right? So any media you put in there, whether it's biological or chemical, it's going to stay so clean. You know, the pores of your activated carbon aren't going to be clogged by funk, and you're going to get more life out of it. And then if you think about it, like, it's also like a reasonable size. It's not like a few liters of media in a media reactor, which is considered small for like 100, 200 gallon tank. Man, I measure chemical media in handfuls, and there's probably like, you could probably put 4 or 5 handfuls of GFO or aluminum oxide or carbon in the bottom of that. So it's one of those things, they didn't have to include that, and it would still be an awesome device. And just the fact that it's there, it's like, boom, got your media reactor or your biological all in one. That was a very clever addition.
Yeah, and it's got, it looks very robust if you don't want to hang it off the side. Like, it's got the feet to have a basically standalone, standing on its own type setup.
So some of the other models, you know, they're built out of acrylic, and it's easy to get started with acrylic, right? You just get it, you know, some sheets laser cut and you assemble as needed, but it's not really as robust. So this thing is, you know, kind of a heavy duty plastic injection molded, which is really stout legs. And I have one, and I'm already like dreaming about adding 2 or 3 more around the studio on tanks that don't have them yet, especially like the water box. But so you had some notes about automatic filter roll and some of the kind of maybe side benefits that we haven't really thought about or considered yet.
Well, so yeah, one is part of a larger subject, but we can talk about, I mean, so my deep thoughts. I've been thinking a lot about it because I've always been, not always, I've tinkered a lot. I've run true algae turf scrubbers from Inland Aquatics back in the day. I've done Jobert. I love all the different methods. And in the end, I settled on, hey, what works for me is run a bunch of Caulerpa or Cato in your sump and run a skimmer, and that's it, right? And that's just for some reason always worked for me, even to the point that tanks where I had problems, once I threw in refugium or a macroalgae scrubber, things turned the corner for the better. So I became a pretty big believer in them. And I don't necessarily know if it's related to taking up phosphates and nitrates. Maybe there's some chemical warfare from algae to algae. I don't know. But it's just, I definitely noticed that when you start intentionally growing algae in one place, the tank starts to vibe a lot better for me. But so I've been really resistant to change, and I don't like filter socks. I never liked mechanical filtration. And then I was curious about this filter roll thing, and I have the Gen 3 Clarity on this new tank, and I have to admit I'm kind of in love with it, as a method. And I haven't seen the usual, the tank's still new, but I didn't go through an ugly stage. And then part of that had a lot to do with me instant coral, insta tank approach. But things have gone, knock on wood, relatively smoothly. And it got me thinking, even with how I do things, and I don't do bare bottom, I don't keep it very sterile. Is that little extra bit of export of particulate matter, circumventing the need for me to have another form of nutrient export, right? So, I think I told you on the phone, it got me even thinking, like, do I pull my Kato off my big tank? Do I put a filter roller there? So yeah, it's not a very heavy-handed question, but the direct replacement was to get rid of filter socks, but I feel like there was an indirect replacement because it definitely has impact on reducing the load on the skimmer. And I also feel like just nipping all of that uneaten food, undecomposed particulate matter in the bud means that your dissolved organics, right, your dissolved nitrogenous waste that become food sources for your plants, for your algae and for your corals, right, is reduced as well. So you don't have this dependency on some organism consuming that in a more dissolved bioavailable state. So yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. And then you brought up a really good point on the phone about there's something to be said for the lower maintenance on upkeep of keeping your skimmer and your return pump in good shape, right? It's keeping all of that downstream stuff in the sump just spotless.
Can I just say, I don't know why, but I've always loved the combination of the words nitrogenous waste. Just the way nitrogenous comes out. It's just, there's something poetic about it. But yeah, I'm not sure how many people are really thinking about some of the side effects, the unintended consequences of using an automatic filter roll. Because if you're exporting that waste before it can break down, I'm sure everybody is looking at it as a way to reduce the bioload, the effective bioload of the aquarium by removing those uneaten foods and the detritus and fecal matter and whatnot. But also when you have uneaten food and things that are breaking down, that is decreasing your ORP. That is also fueling bacterial growth, which when it respires, exudes CO2. Like, I'm not sure how much we can attribute depressed CO2 to like a buildup of organics, but certainly there's like a point where, okay, your organics are really depressing your CO2. And my main reason for mechanical filtration is to not reduce maintenance per se, but ensure the proper operation of my return pump and the protein skimmer, not just the impeller, reducing the biofilm that accumulates within the volute and the spinning magnet, but also all the buildup on our needle whales. Almost virtually all of us are using needle whales now, and for sure, like, that's going to keep your stuff operating much better. Much better over a longer period of time, reducing problems, reducing issues, reducing equipment malfunction. And I think those side effects, God, we're talking about another generation of reef keepers before that kind of gets written, etched in stone as far as like things that we believe and know to be true. So we still, we still have some time. But the one thing that I was thinking too is like, we both talked about the potential for some of the smaller micron filter rolls to remove certain parasites.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking to myself, like, how crazy would it be on, just on a hypothetical reef tank, if it had the 200 micron reef mat, taking the water first, and then that was going into a chamber that would somehow feed a Clarisy with a 50 micron of fleece. Would that be overkill? If you really want, I mean, it would be a diminishing return to add a secondary automatic filter roll. It's just for hypothetical sake. But man, if somebody wanted to build like a be all end all automatic filter roll, I don't think it'd be super crazy to put a 200 mesh filter roll and then maybe right underneath it, a finer one. I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah, I mean,
the look on your face. You're like, wait, what? We need 2 filter rolls now?
No, but that's the other. I could talk longer about. So I know that it was a way to automate mechanical filtration, and people didn't want to have to pull their filter socks. But I feel like it has, and maybe someone who was super OCD about filter socks would look at this comment and say, "Duh," because the effect would be the same about somebody who was diligent about replacing filter socks a lot. But just all of the downstream benefits, right? I mean, you'd have less dependency on carbon and yellowing of your water. Obviously, we talked about protein skimmers. One of the beneficial side effects of running a UV is I have really great water clarity. But guess what? This tank down here doesn't run UV, but runs the Clarisy and has amazing water clarity. So again, that's one other dependency potentially, from a UV perspective. And yeah, parasites, right? We'll get into that in a second, but
just think about free floating Aiptasia.
Yeah.
Right. When we were kind of ramping up the tanks here, Evan coined a term of Aiptasia going pelagic, right? Where you have some Aiptasia that are just like, thick, chunky anemones that just, really attach to where they are. And if they're, I don't know what the trigger is, or if it's just a function of having a bunch, but they hit the water somehow and they start floating around into your overflow box, into your sump. Like they didn't walk there. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying. And so, just reducing all those pests, every little thing, like, how big are Valonia spores? How big are, little bits of bryopsis?
Little algae, yeah. I have this weird dormant dino, and I've done experiments where I lower my water temperature and the dinos show up. And then when I raise my water temperature, the dinos go away. And this new tank, one of the brief uglies I had was dinos showed up, but that filter roller was just going into overtime. And what was interesting is, dinos stink, right? I mean, when you have dinos, your tank smells like fishy. And that filter roller stunk. But I could hear it doing its little churn. And I don't know what the micron size of dinoflagellates is, but I always look at mechanical filtration. Like I'll take polyfill, which you can buy, quilt batting, and I'll throw that into a filter sometimes when I need to clear something up. If I, let's say you've added new sand, and you know this, even if there are things that could pass through that mechanical filtration while it's still clean, as that filter media gets clogged up with larger particulates, it starts to filter out smaller and smaller micron things. And so eventually you just have this crystal clear tank. The same could be said for these filter rollers, right? Like that 200 micron, is it 200 micron for the Red Sea? As it starts to catch particulate matter, it's going to filter smaller and smaller microns. The same about the Clarisy. So I'm telling you, the filter roller was brown, and the only thing I could attribute to this brand new tank was dinos. And so you're just exporting these dinos when they go into free swimming mode at night, right? But
every battle with pest is a small war of attrition. right? You're just hoping to take care of it faster than it can grow. So if the UV can help, if the Clarice can help, if lowering the temperature can help, I swear, man, people are not catching on to this temperature thing that you shared over a year ago. And I really think there's a connection between lower nutrients and lower temperature and this boom of dinoflagellates. I still need to like have a direct conversation with Mike Sensky. I think I mentioned this before. He had a major account that had a big bloom of dinoflagellates, and he threw the kitchen sink at it. He lowered the temperature, he dosed iron, and I don't think the tank already had UV, so maybe he just like wiped down the bulbs or added into UV. I'm not sure, but the temperature thing, man, I really think that's something people are gonna figure out. And I don't know what other people's tanks are running at. My tanks are about 75 to 77 in the wintertime. In the summertime, I let them kind of naturally rise up to about 78 to 79. Even if they hit 80, like, it doesn't bother me none. But what are the temperatures that you have seen? Because you're kind of the vanguard of this temperature versus dinoflagellate discussion.
So it wasn't my idea, right? It was a guy's YouTube that he accidentally misconfigured a heater in one tank. He had two tanks with dinos, and his nano, the heater was misconfigured, and his tank temp shot up, and he couldn't figure out why his dinos were gone in the nano, but they were still existing in his large tank. So I don't have the person's name, but credit to him for having good observation and starting to try to figure out, okay, what's different. And I do know that there are people that this has not worked for, similar to UV has not worked for like UV seems to target one species of dino, but if you have the other kind of dino, UV does nothing for you. But after I saw his YouTube, I said, okay, I'm going to just bump my tanks up to 82 degrees Fahrenheit, which was not an uncommon temperature to run your tank at back in the halite days. And the common wisdom back then was take whatever your peak temperature is during the day when your halides are cooking your tank and just adjust your heater to that so you don't have massive temperature swings. So at night, your tank would be 82. Now, I don't know if everybody follows that. I know plenty of people that have large fluctuations in temperature on their tank, but and it didn't happen overnight, right? It wasn't a big cure type situation where like, oh, they're dead, but it just shifted the balance and the competitive advantage. And I started to see more of the familiar faces of algae, right, start to show up. And the dinos started to just wither away and they were gone. What's also weird is I'm going to knock on my wood desk here. I don't get cyano anymore. So I keep my tanks now at 80.5, right? So it fluctuates between 80 and 81. I don't have cyano. I never get cyano, not even in my sump, right? In my refugium, which usually everybody's got a little bit, like a little patch of cyano, in their Cato, whatever. So why would I put the temperature back down to 77, 78? I'm like, some juju's working here and I'm not going to mess with it. I mean, I can do all kinds of stupid things to my tank. My nitrates bottomed out to 0. No cyano, no dinos. I'm not trying to preach everyone should run their tanks at this temperature, but it's like I have no compelling argument to bring it back down. Can we talk about nutrients a little bit? Sure, yeah.
So, the followers of Reef Builders, the website and the YouTube channel and Reef Therapy know that maybe about 2 years ago, I was really starting to realize that my nutrients are really low. And last year, the HANA nitrate checker came out. And I discovered that, several of my systems are running 0.00 nitrates. And so now we test nitrates once a week, and I know which ones are going to suck it up real fast. And I'm looking at my Red Sea tank with like a lot of SPS corals and a clam, and it's just like a field of corals, right? And there's a few of the deep water style acros, like a purple dragon with green tips, an orange dragon, kind of a rosy table-ish kind of coral acro, and then my Suharsenoi. And they've been like excessively pale for a few weeks. a few months, I'll say. And I just recently like reduced the channel with the red and the green LEDs, hoping that would help a little bit. And just on a whim, literally a few hours ago, we tested the phosphates on that tank and another tank using the Hanna checker. Phosphates are 0.00. I'm like, how is that possible? I'm literally trying to feed these fish more. Like when I'm feeding the fish, I'm thinking about all their poop going to the water and feeding all the corals. So for the first time ever today, I deliberately added phosphates to a reef tank. After 27 years of reefing, I added phosphates on purpose. On purpose. I'm using, Brightwell Neophos. Now, the other thing that struck me is like, if I poured the 500 ml bottle into basically about 200 gallons of water volume, that would raise my phosphates by 0.05. And I understand, not Brightwell doesn't want anybody to get anybody who's offering a phosphate solution. They don't want people to get in trouble. But I was thinking about it and like the value of the phosphate inside that bottle is worth less than the cap. Right, you're just talking about a few pennies worth of phosphates. I'm like, all right, well, we'll try this a little bit because I have several bottles, and again, you won't get in trouble with it. I think I dosed 100 mLs to one of the tanks and got it up to 0.02. I'm over here like, oh my God, my phosphates are too low. And, the Ghanies in the other tank are just not as vivid as they should be. And I just think it's so many corals. They're just sucking it up. Obviously, we've got decent mechanical filtration, decent protein skimming, bare bottom. We keep the sump super clean. We did some pretty good water changes before reef stock, just make sure everything was super kosher and rolling. But I'm just still like, I get adding nitrate because I've done planted tanks a lot and understand like a field of plants will suck down your nitrates. But, usually phosphates, like a little bit of fish poop will go a long way. But I'm just kind of flabbergasted that it must be a critical mass of coral. Like the coral has become the entire filter for this tank. And the automatic filter and the protein skimmer is basically just my security blanket.
Yeah,
I have thought about turning down the protein skimmer. So I think I'm going to do that next, which is awesome because it's got a controllable protein skimmer. So I can just, turn it down a few tens of percent and, just see if I can find that balance of the tank holding on to its own phosphates.
I actually just ordered my phosphate test kit was way expired because I never test for it. But I grew curious about what my phosphate levels are. I have a ton of Coralline algae growing on the back glass, but it seems to be really slow on the uptake on the rocks. And I was just curious about, because a lot of people, when they start dosing kalkwasser, they say, okay, that was their cure to getting, massive coralline growth. And I always wonder, is it pH related or is it that kalkwasser binds phosphates and coralline algae does calcification, right? Like a coral and high phosphate levels could inhibit calcification. I don't think that's my problem, but I just wanted to be sure what the numbers are. But that also goes back to me trying to get more fish in my tank. I'm trying to add more fish because nitrates bottoming out is a problem for me as well. But I was dosing potassium nitrate, but then out of curiosity, I tested my potassium and it was through the roof. So that scared me. Then I switched to calcium nitrate.
What is through the roof?
I'd have to look it up.
Because I think natural seawater levels 480 milligrams per liter.
Yeah.
My tanks consistently run about 450, 460. So I'm like, I'm within 5%, so I don't worry about it. And then I'm raising the nitrates, a few ppms. So, it's 1 ppm of potassium for every ppm of nitrate that I'm adding. So I'm not worried about the potassium nitrate. But what do you think was through the roof? I'm just curious what you thought the threshold was.
600. I didn't see any negative effects, but yeah. And I was really only dosing. I was only dosing about 1 ppm a day. Yeah. So then I switched to calcium nitrate. And I was dosing that, happy as a camper, thinking, well, it's calcium, right? But I did see in one of my smaller systems that my calcium got up above 500. Again, I didn't see any weird side effects, but it just got me thinking, man, it'd just be easier if I just add a crap ton more fish. Now,
yeah,
that's going to also skew your phosphate numbers, but that's a bridge I'm willing to cross and figure out. So this, we could segue into two topics from here, but we'll circle back to. I liked our discussion about filter rollers potentially having a positive impact on fish parasites, right, or potentially even Aiptasia, other types
let's
of
just
pests.
call them reef parasites.
Yeah. And that was another coffee thinking moment for me of, are there certain things that unintentionally make tanks over time less hospitable to these parasites? And so those people have less problems with them, right? There's been a lot of debate about UV sterilizers, right? Because you plummet into your sump. It's not going to kill every single parasite that's swimming around in your display tank, but I think most people who have used them long term do see that eventually that parasitic load diminishes, right? And part of that could also be just gained immunity from your fish, your corals, and other microorganisms becoming great little predators for those parasites, right? But in my opinion, I've seen a good experience with sticking a UV on a tank. It's not going to cure a heavy infestation overnight. That fish that looks like it's on its last leg ain't going to be saved by a UV. But over the period of months, it does seem to have a positive effect. And, you've brought up bare bottom tanks before as being, less hospitable to fish parasites, potentially other pests as well, right? So I guess the open-ended question there is, coral biomass, right? Corals are going to eat microorganisms. UV sterilizer, having small micron mechanical filtration in the shape of a filter roll. I'm not a fan of bare bottom, but a Coralline coated bare bottom tank is probably not going to be the best place for ick to, go for it.
A lawn of zoanthids.
Yeah.
A lawn of encrusting Cyphastria. A lawn of any encrusting corals, or even green star polyp. That doesn't look bad. But one thing I'll say about UV, and this is kind of a permanent opinion of mine, I have never seen a reef tank or any tank that suffered from having a UV. The only thing to really consider is, the small bump in temperature because it's a heat source.
Yeah.
So I've never seen anyone get in trouble with the UV. It's not the same thing as overcomplicating your reef tank with lots of controllers and switches and doodads. There's virtually no harm in having a UV. On paper, yes, it's going to reduce your biodiversity of things in the tank. But if you look at any tank that's had a UV, they're not hurting, right? Life finds a way, in the immortal words of Jeff Goldblum. Life finds a way. But then again, once in a while, you see tanks where you're like, all right, this tank's a little scuzzy. The water's got a certain soupiness to it, and there's just a little bit too much biology going on. I think we romanticize biodiversity and all the things that can grow as something that we want in our aquariums. But you got to understand, man, in the ocean, it's a nonstop battle of every creature against every other creature to survive, right? So perhaps, the UV is filling in a role of just tamping down some of that biology in the beginning or in the end to just help it more gradually adjust like you were saying, over a long period of time, but the corals might be eating some of these parasites, and I don't think a coral really cares if a microorganism is alive or freshly cooked from UV. The only thing about UV is just make sure to do your due diligence. Make sure you have a proper flow rate through there. You can't have it ripping. You need to replace your lamps once in a while, every 8 to 12 months, depending on your brand, and you got to clean off that quartz sleeve.
Yeah.
You can't just like any other device, you can't just set it and forget it forever. Like there's a tiny bit of maintenance, and with a UV sterilizer, I mean, you're just talking about, kicking the tires about once a year or every 2 years. It's not asking too much.
Yeah. And I mean, there's been folks struggling with a lot, especially in the LPS department now, some coral pathogens, right? Some are bacterial. You just have to wonder if that could be a potential solution to stave off some of those issues, right? I mean, I had my fun run when I tried to add biodiversity, to your point, by adding some Florida Keys sand. And I ended up with SCTN bacteria that took out, a 6-year-old Favia coral that I had, and an orange tongue coral, and it was yeah,
not the orange herbolitha. Oh god, that hurts. That hurts for me retroactively.
Yeah, I mean, I still have one left, but it was kind of cool having two. Anyway, but
so
I did not have a UV at that time, right? But it just kind of, I wonder if I popped one of those on, would that have helped? Now, the bacteria that's on the coral tissue, again, it's not swimming around going through your sump, but it could.
But some of it is.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know for sure. But the one thing I just want the audience to really understand, it's not black and white, right? It's not, you're not adding a UV to exterminate XYZ pest parasite. I love how we came into this freestyling and we're just basically talking about UV sterilizers with just no prep. It's not digital, right? It's analog. It's not on off. It's not 0 and 1. It's a gradient. If there's a couple flies, a couple mosquitoes, flying around you, and you get a couple bites, whatever, you're gonna live. Same thing with the coral, with some whatever these unknown pathogens are, and but if you're like surrounded by a swarm of flies or mosquitoes and they're biting you all over and getting in your eyes, you're not gonna have a good time. And that's the same thing with corals. Whatever this suite of mystery pathogens that we're still on the frontier of understanding, knocking them back is that's the goal. Not exterminating. You're probably never going to exterminate. The entire surface of the coral is an ecosystem of microbes, and it's just about tipping that balance. So things like automatic filter rolls, UV sterilizers, and ozone can just help, create a just more healthful environment for your fish and for your corals.
Yeah, I agree. I've always been a keep it simple kind of guy, and having run a UV for a few years on and off, and I usually use it as a treatment, right? Or, hey, I'm hoping to add new fish. But I see that side effect, right? And the filter roller, for a guy that really liked the whole Walter 80 au natural approach, this robotic mechanical filter has definitely won my heart. I love that little thing. Yeah, that's a good book. I think everyone should read that. We forgot about our book recommendations, but that one was definitely that one was on my list to talk about. No, but I mean it's endearing. I hear the little motor turn when I add some fish food. Like he's like a little grumpy little machine.
It's not loud.
No, it's not. It's super quiet, but it's just
enough
to let you know.
Pumps to let you know that the gears are turning. No one's going to complain about that noise. It's not constant, but just enough to oh yeah, it's working. It's
like a little fish grunting in your sump, like, hey, I noticed you put something in the tank. Anyway, but then so speaking of fish, and this is maybe. I me expressing some humility because I don't know if it's me or if other people are having similar experiences. But has the quality of fish just gone downhill, or, is it? And so I'll preface this. I've heard reports of, these cargo planes or planes carrying cargo, and these folks that are collecting fish and coral, they're hoping to get their boxes on the plane, and then they don't get that plane, and then they have to wait for the next plane, and it's sitting on the tarmac and they're waiting. So I know there's supply chain issues, right? I know that wholesalers are were at least bringing in a lot less during the height of COVID. And so, that impacts the livestock. And I'm not going to blame my problems there, but man, I used to think I had a blue thumb when it came to fish. Like, I felt like I was a pro at conditioning fish. Like, I could take that sick fish from the store and turn it around, or just any fish I ordered, I felt reasonably confident that if it showed up breathing in the bag, that I could get it through some decent quarantine. And, I feed the hell in quarantine. I condition them. I turn them into fat little beggars before I put them in my main tank. But my success rate in doing that has been miserable the last few months. And I'm wondering, is it me? Or, I've gotten a lot of more DOAs too, right? Just a lot less fish showing up alive. I've tried a buttload of different vendors. The one I had the best experience with was TSM. Those things were begging for food in the bag. I was highly impressed. And I know I was going to essentially stick with them going forward because I was so impressed. But then, of course, it's sad to hear that Matt passed away, and then, they went offline for a bit. I think they're coming back online. But in that time frame, I tried some other quarantine fish vendors. I've tried the usual suspects. I'm not going to get into names or vendors because I don't want to badmouth anybody, because I am a sample size of one and it's not fair to the vendor. I'm just curious because, local fish store owners are dealing with wholesale fish, right? Is it, I don't know about you. I know you haven't been, you're more coral focused and you probably aren't bringing in a ton of fish into the studio, but it just feels
Mark,
like there's something up there.
You are absolutely right. I just had this conversation with Elliot Lim of Marine Collectors just the other day. My old fish display, 150-gallon tank, a clare and angelfish, a few butterfly fish, sanguineous hogfish, and I would throw fish in quarantine and do nothing more than copper if necessary. Mm-hmm. Throw them in the tank, and then no problem. My only issues back, 5-7 years ago was aggression. I only lost fish when something dynamic changed in the tank and somebody beat up somebody else. And since doing the studio, I've been more diligent about deep quarantining, using, several layers of praziquantel and, medicated foods and, putting them in my fish tank, and then just all these residual parasites cropping up later. And I was talking to Elliot, I never used to have this problem.
Yeah.
You get the fish to a certain level of quarantine, just make sure it doesn't have Vic, boom, you're done. And it's great. And we're just talking about the last 5 to 10 years. And yes, certain fish have gotten a lot harder. And I think, I have a theory, I think it's a side effect of our own success of the reef aquarium hobby. So if you rewind the clock 15, 20 years, the higher quality, the higher priced fish, the higher value fish, they were treated with respect, right? Any kind of large tang, fancy anthias, big wrasses, big angelfish, they were treated with respect. But we always had trouble with the green chromuses.
Oh, yeah.
Damselfish also, and you're just how are the hardiest fish having a hard time surviving? Well, it's because they're treated like crap. They sell, the export price used to be a few cents. You're talking about 10 to 15 cents before, the shipping costs and freight and all that stuff was added to it. Obviously, it's a lot more now. And chromuses were really hard because it was just, you had to just buy 20 and hope you'd end up with like 7 or 8. Right.
And they were always prone to, what was it, Uranema? Or, is that how you say it? That was like
they're packed into bags very tightly. They're shipped they're just handled poorly all along the way. So now the reef aquarium hobby, the saltwater aquarium hobby, is much larger. There's a lot more fish being caught, a lot more dealers, and people. So also back in the day, we got to say back in the day a few times per episode. I remember wholesalers like really taking pride in their systems. They would shut them down. They had so many systems, right? There was always a few systems that were fallow. They would shut them down, bleach them, and then start them over because they could handle the capacity with a couple systems down. And I really believe, this is my personal theory, that in addition to just all the collectors, exporters, importers, and retailers trying to satisfy the demand, and quality going down with increasing quantity, I think there's a lot more exotic pests that are brewing at each one of these collection points or handling points.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot more stress on the fish. They're not being treated nearly as much as precious as we used to in the past. And I'm just talking about the supply chain, right? And as a secondary effect, because everybody's just trying to keep up with the demand, those systems are not getting bleached and reset like they used to. Sure, they have copper. Sure, they hit them with Prazi and formalin. I mean, I used to be the one. I don't even know if you can get formalin. I know formalin was like the go-to for just knocking back everything. But a lot of regulations, I think, have made that a lot harder to get your hands on. So it's a oddball knock-on effect. But yeah, I was, me and Ellie were both saying same thing you said is, we used to think we knew how to handle fish. We used to think that, oh yeah, no problem. That fish shows up even in 10, 15% alive. It's going to live forever. I'm going to turn that thing into just a greedy little pig and condition it like crazy and add it to my tank and just never think about it. And now I'm looking less in my reef tanks, but more in my fish tank. I'm looking at hitting that thing with Prazi powder twice a year, just prophylactically, because there's just things that creep up. And if I don't, I feel like certain fish, like the small pygmy angelfish, they'll get like the gill flukes. And I'm like, all right, well, I keep hitting this with Prazi power. The gill flukes keep coming back and I'm not adding new fish. And it's frustrating. It's discouraging.
Yeah,
but I do not. But just to kind of like circle back to what you were saying, I don't have any of these parasite issues in my reef tanks.
Yeah, and I have been always a very big proponent of quarantine. But yeah, part of me starts to wonder if maybe some of these fish I just gotta throw into a reef, and dump and pray. But I that would be after some observation, right? That you don't have the really scary ones like velvet, and that's the stuff that just nukes your whole system. But and I have been reading some things online about flukes that are resistant to Prazi, and I always butcher medical terms or medical pharmaceutical names, so I apologize. But I think they're trying to treat now with fenbendazole or something like that.
Fenbendazole.
Thank you. There's
all these azoles. There's all these different
metronidazole
treatments, and I just
But
Metro is a really old one.
Yeah, no, it's another Zol, right? Yeah, I don't know. I have my quarantine tank. It's got the most mature nitrifying system ever. I usually keep a token fish in there to keep everything running smoothly. And I've got nice dim lights, like to set the mood. I mean, I for someone who doesn't like to feed a lot of frozen food, it's more of a treat in my main display. New fish, man, they get fattened up and pampered. Mm-hmm. But I'll get fish that...
It's not just you.
No, I get
Just DOAs. To get back to your question, it's not just you.
Yeah. It's just frustrating.
And so
yeah. Go ahead.
The unfair thing is, this is not really happening, to my knowledge, at the importer level or at the retail level. You know, they lose a few weak fish, but I think most of these long-term effects are being felt by the consumer because it's a different class of parasites. And not happy with it. Like I said, my previous fish display tank, if I put a fish in there, it's in there forever. And unless something beats it up or kills it, or I decide to take it out because it's so big and aggressive, it doesn't fit in the mix anymore. And now I'm just like so gun shy. I called Elliot. I was like, dude, can you make me a couple annulus angelfish? Because that's how we started the conversation. I was like, I don't really feel comfortable doing the thorough quarantine. Like I still kind of do, but I want someone who's more of a fish guy, who's just really tuned into that. Like I love my fish and I know what to do, but I'm more tuned into my corals and what to do with them. And right now, bringing in more fish while creating all this content and building a couple more tanks, I'm like, I don't have the bandwidth. I was like, Elliot, can you make me a couple of nice annulus angelfish, please?
And I didn't want to mention names, but I have not ordered from him. So all the bad experiences, none of that could be attributed to him, because I did mention, some quarantine fish vendors, but I've never ordered from him. So maybe I should give him a try. But I mean, I'm 0 for 3 on mystery wrasses. I got one from my local fish store.
What?
And they're always...
Ooh, that stinks.
They're eating, they're happy, they're cruising in my tank, right? They passed the quarantine gauntlet. They're rocking the local fish store one. And then they, at first, and they're not jumping, right? They're, because I know when a fish dies in my tank because the algae on my glass, how much algae produces on microalgae shows up on your glass, and all of a sudden you see a ton of microalgae in your glass, and you're like, let me do a fish count, and then you're like, oh yeah, there's one decomposing somewhere, fertilizer. So then I ordered a quarantine one. I've tried it all, right? And then I did one where I'm like, F it, I'm going to quarantine one myself, right? I'm going to get one that's just direct from a wholesaler. Or not from a wholesaler, but if you order from, like, say, Live Aquarium, it's not the Diver's Den, it's coming out of California.
And it's probably as fresh as you're going to get.
And I can always get them through quarantine, and they're fat and they're eating and they're little beggars, and then they just slowly just disappear. And to the point that I wondered, do I have a predator in my tank? But yeah, I mean,
maybe you got a bobbit worm with that Florida rock. And it's just hiding in your rock or your sand and just scooping up. It's got a taste for Parachylinus ocellatus. That's
and I mean, so that's a bad example, I guess, because the quarantine, I just, today I scooped up a dead leopard wrasse out of my quarantine tank, and the thing never showed a sign of disease, but it had a sunken belly, right? It went through Prazi, never ate, and just wasted away and died. And I know leopard wrasses are hard, but I had a pajama cardinal in there, died 24 hours after it arrived. Freaking pajama cardinal.
I think there might be something there, and this is a good time to address our listeners on the YouTube channel. If you are experiencing some of these mysterious fish deaths after doing everything right, buying from a quality source, putting it through quarantine, conditioning it to a point where it's just a great fish, and then you put it in your display, and then, weeks or months later, it mysteriously dies, that is not normal, right? If you're a newer aquarist, you should know that. And this is one of those cases where it's like, all right, well, hopefully I'll start captive breeding mystery wrasses one of these days.
And I know somebody out there is going to argue that quarantine kills more fish, and there's the anti-quarantine crowd. And I hear you, but I've been quarantining fish for a long time, and this is a net new difference, right? This is a change. I mean, I don't treat heavily. I don't nuke the fish. I also feed a ton of frozen food. I gut load brine shrimp with all kinds of goodies and feed them that. I try to keep the, probiotics of the fish, the internal gut flora. I try to target that. I've even messed with beta glucan, I've done it all. And I found something that works for me. And I felt confident in my quarantine skills. So yes, a crappy quarantine does kill a lot of fish, but that's not the issue here.
That's not what we're talking about.
No.
Well, let us know below if you've had some similar challenges, going through the motions of doing everything right. And maybe we can talk about a more uplifting topic now.
Yeah. Well, those were, so here's a really short 5-minute. And I know, you've got probably a different approach to this because you're not a guy at home with a reef tank. You've got a studio with a bazillion tanks, but, disaster preparedness, I see a lot of wisdom out there about, it's usually the same article with the same bullet points or the same YouTube video. And it's like, do this, do this, do this, do this. And, if you can't afford a generator, get a inverter for your car, get a battery, blah, blah, blah. And two things that I think when I witnessed what happened in Texas, and that got me thinking because we get ice storms here in Georgia. One is, yes, generators are good, but they make portable dual fuel generators that take propane, the same tanks of propane you put on your barbecue. And the reason I feel like people should talk about that is because our crowd never uses a generator, right? It sits in your garage. You use it for a disaster, and then it sits back in your garage. And in my opinion, a gasoline generator sucks for that application. Storing gasoline and not having it go bad is a pain in the butt, right? Keeping a gasoline-powered engine clean and operational is a pain in the butt. But I was just going to throw out there, they make portable generators now that cost as much as a gasoline generator. It runs on propane, and you can store a tank of barbecue-style grill propane for years in your, there's nothing you need to do to it. And then the other thing, just random thought, and I brought this up in the past, but if you lose power in winter, your heater will not keep your tank warm enough if the ambient air temperature inside your house gets too cold, right? Heaters are really designed to raise it maybe 10 degrees. I don't know.
That's asking a lot.
Yeah. If you're lucky enough to have a gas-powered furnace, the electricity that powers that furnace is less than 200 watts, and they make these cool little transfer switches that you can have an electrician, or if you're handy, don't electrocute yourself, use somebody that knows what they're doing. But it's essentially a transfer switch just for your furnace that allows you to plug an extension cord into it and run it off of an extension cord, which you can plug into a portable generator. And now your wife and your kids are happy as well because they're not freezing to death staring at your fish. And, it's much easier if you can keep your house warm to keep your fish warm. So,
well, on a similar note, if it's cold, wrap your tank in a blanket.
Yeah.
Cover the tank with styrofoam. Don't just run it like normal. Obviously, skip the lights. Maybe, skimmer's probably not that much. But yeah, think about these other things that we do to stay warm when we're cold. Treat your tank like that, because, what if you're throwing 300 watts towards your heater, but like you said, the ambient temperature is really cold, but your tank is also not covered. Well, you're just really not doing yourself any favors.
Yeah.
I'm really fortunate that I've lived in Golden 15 years and never had the power out any significant amount of time. I think there's been a couple times when the power went out here and I went on a bike ride just because I knew that the power were going to come back on and everything would come on just fine. Maybe a couple things need to be kickstarted because, we're looking at a couple hundred devices running here at the studio. But for my part, my preparedness is a lot of batteries, a lot of battery operated air pump. Because, this whole place is well insulated. If it was cold or if it was, too hot, I would just turn off the lights and open it up, let it breathe. It doesn't get that hot in Colorado. And for me, it's just all about that aeration. Aeration is, super duper key, especially when it's hot. And when it's cold. But when it's cold, it's not that much of a problem because of the gas-powered furnace, like you mentioned.
Yeah, it was, again, just a random thought because I think I stumbled on some preparedness video of what to do with your reef tank. And I thought, man, why is nobody talking about these two things, right? Propane portable generators that are built for camping. And, hey, gas furnaces, man, they don't take a lot of electricity. Now, electric furnace, different story. But
right.
It's just some stuff to think about. All the things that we overthink in this hobby, and we get into the nitty gritty. Every YouTube video about buying a generator for your reef tank talks about a gasoline generator, and I had a gasoline
they also talk
generator.
about keeping everything on.
Yeah,
right. I've seen some folks have like an automatic switch to the circuit that runs their tank. Then they're just so proud that during a power outage, everything is on. I'm like, is that really what we're trying to do here in a time of crisis? But along with those same lines, keeping a clean tank, keeping that detritus down. So if you have a stress event, you're not encountering a cascade reaction of you don't have enough oxygen for the bacteria in the sump, and then it's creating kind of a foul situation, and that stresses another animal, and then they start fouling, and then everything starts fouling, and then you have a dead tank.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because bare bottom tanks always. Sorry, go ahead.
I have a nice collection of rechargeable battery air pumps.
I don't have the rechargeable
just
ones.
As a matter of fact.
Who makes the rechargeable?
I've got a bunch of folks. No brand makes it, right? They put their sticker on it. I've been collecting them from just Asian suppliers for a long time. Every time I go to Inazoo, I pick up one or two, and they're USB powered, so you could charge them off a battery bank. And it's like, yep, there you go. I don't need a mountain of D cells or anything. But yeah, I'm lucky. But it's your reef tank, making it resilient to a power outage is the same as making it resilient to everything. Keeping things clean, not having a giant pet sand bed. It's different if you have a small ornamental sand bed, but if you got a deep sand bed like we used to back in the day, that's one of those things that's going to suck up oxygen.
Bare bottom tanks did way better, right? During a power outage, that was a known fact. Anyway, yeah. It's just, again, random thought that didn't warrant a whole reef therapy, but it's one of those where, I look at it and go, why is nobody talking about these things? Just because.
Well, they left it for us. They knew we were coming.
Yeah. So
I don't know if you remember, but earlier days of reef builders, I used to do this thing of virtual window shopper, where I would scour the websites, all 10 of them that sold corals online.
Oh, yeah.
And would just earmark a few things. And today I started doing that. Literally went to Google, typed in, live coral for sale, and just visited every kind of place. I got 3 pages through, and I was like, all right, that's enough. That's enough. I just want to point out some corals that are undervalued, or some hidden gems, or
send that to me first before you publish it.
You're not wrong, because I already ordered some of the corals that I found. I was stupefied because, I spent a couple hours just skim. Like next one. All these names I've never heard of. I think one company just launched, and I found some really incredible stuff. I found these large Pachyceras frags for $10 from A Reef Creation. He had several of them. $10. And they were, sort of colorful, kind of olive with very tiny green mouths and a ever so slightly blue edge. I was at the public aquarium this weekend. My sister-in-law was getting certified to dive in one of their big tanks, and I looked at their displays. I'm like, oh man, you got some cool Pachyceras in there. I was like, I need to see if I can get some of that. So found some Pachyceras. This one company had these insane, really cool micromusas, actual micromusas. One of them was speckly green. They called it the Lizard King. Another one was kind of UFO style, but had 50, 60 polyps. It was $100. The green one with 3 mouths was $10. They had another one that was a little bit bigger. It was $20. I was I just typed in micromusas and just ordered all of them. I'm like, these are all very cool and underpriced. Let's see. I found another Marulina labeled as a Platygyra, nice kind of rich brown coloration, a hint of pink with green in the valleys. It was $20, $30. We're talking about legitimately rare corals in the hobby now. They're not, they're actually rare. What I think another one that was super surprising is I found a frag of Leptoria. They just called it alien maize. I've been looking for 3 years for a good Leptoria. I've got a colony about 6 months ago in Dallas, but finding this frag, I'm like, man, I need Leptoria in some of the other tanks. And it was like $20. But the biggest score, which I haven't ordered yet, was I found this pink and green Costanaria. Do you remember Costanaria? Vaguely, loosely. It's kind of like a love child of Samacora and Leptastria. And if you look at pictures of like diving specimens, you're like, well, whatever. But and I remember there was this pink one that used to come in, periodically, probably mostly from Fiji. But the ones that they were selling was pink with like green polyps. And the thing that pissed me off was not that they didn't know it was Costanaria, is that it looked a lot more like a Leptostrea than a Samacora, and they had listed as a Samacora. I'm like, dude, in what planet does that look like a Samacora? And I know right now the listeners with no visual aids are like, all right, that's too many coral names to throw out there. And but once again, those Costanaria frags, there was 3 of them. They were $39.99 and marked down to $20. They're not shipping for a while, so I haven't ordered them yet. But you know what? I'm going to order all 3 of them. I'm going to put them in 3 different tanks, and I'm like, pink and green Costanaria, legitimately rare. Yeah, I think those were the biggest scores from there. But yeah, I'll let you get a look at the list first. But it was just just highlighting something from everyone. You know who I didn't list? It was freaking extreme corals, dude. Like, and they're not the worst, but going to like, let's say it was about 30 or 40 vendors I went to, and I didn't find a good coral to share from each one of them. But the quality of the coral images were all over the map. Like, some people are totally given up and using like really orange filters, and like, a torch coral that should be like a really rich yellow bordering on maybe a hint of orange was like almost pink, almost solid pink. And you're like, dude, that is not what that coral looks like at all. And another place, they were just like super dark. I'm like, would you buy corals from these pictures? And it was just kind of interesting. Just, visited, like I said, 30 coral vendors. 20 of them I'd never visited before. I just typed in Google live coral for sale, go straight to the WYSIWYG, because like I want to see what has actually been sold. Just go straight to the WYSIWYG. And it was an interesting tour, I'll say, because I wasn't looking for anything specific. I was just kind of looking for stuff that was maybe unrecognized or just undervalued, or actually a really neat coral. Like there was this one Solomon Island Millie, unique corals, nice orange with red polyps. It was $200, but it looked the part. You know what I mean? But if you scan a bunch of this stuff, like, oh my goodness, there were some deals to be had out there. And if you're looking for corals and looking for neat corals or looking for deals, man, you got to cast a really wide net. That's where the reef shows really come in, because one guy grows the hell out of, let's just say, Cyphastria, and for him they're breeding like rabbits, and so he's selling them off. Basically, that's the price. And another person is struggling to grow this or that coral, and they'll price it really high. And so definitely a super pro tip when it comes to buying coral is do some random searches. Just do some random searches. I do want to give a little shout out to Lucky Corals. I've kept an eye on their website for about the last year, since I got a really nice rainbow pizza from them, which is looking better than it ever has, by the way. I don't know the name of the guy behind it, but he's got an eye for coral. Yeah. He really has an eye for coral, and I'll be looking through there, and it'd be like just nice branching bubble, nice Australomusas with some cool colors, unique Cinerinas. It's not just an avalanche of acanthophilias and crazy price trackies, and so props to Lucky Corals for just having a little bit more of a curation on the corals that they keep.
I'd love to see your bookmarks, because when I do stumble upon, a little boutique coral vendor that had something interesting or cool, I add it to my little bookmarks folder. And And, usually one night a week, I'm bored sitting on the couch, family's watching a movie I'm not into, and I'll just start clicking all the different vendors and seeing what kind of stuff they have. But I imagine your list is like 10 to 100 times longer than mine. But to your point, I've stumbled on people like that or vendors like that because I have Googled for a coral name, right? And then I find some random website that's selling it. Or it could even be out of stock. But then I'm like, oh, let me see what else they got. My annoyance is I'll find stuff that I'm specifically looking for, let's say 5 different things, and won't find them all on one site. So it's 5 different vendors, and it's not enough to qualify for free shipping because you're only buying that one coral. And so then you're like, man, I just spent how much in shipping across 5 vendors, to get the 5 things I wanted.
If you want the same thing that everybody else wants, it's basic economics, supply and demand. You know what would be super cool to talk about? The plummeting price of tenuous acros and torches, right? Used to be you couldn't look at a tenuous frag for less than a few $100s. I might have mentioned this when I was at TSA and I got 3 colonies of rainbow potential tenuous, and they were $150 to $250 for colonies, reasonable size, multiple branches, and you could see the potential. They weren't totally browned out. And you're seeing that now with the torches, right? They've been really cranking the farm factory in Indonesia and harvesting just all these different colors. Okay, yes, if you want the New York Knicks or something that has Holy Grail in the name, you're still paying through the nose. But like in my random search, I found a guy who was selling cristatas with like a little bit of yellow orange to the tentacle, and they were like $250 for Coralline. I'm like, dude, that is not a torch coral, and had them labeled as a torch coral. And I'm like, you could probably, if I pass laws relating to reef aquariums, like half of those people will go to jail just for straight lying. But these, totally barely colored I call them micro torches, Fimbriophilia cristata. But if you look around, like you can find some really good deals on dragon souls, on Indo golds. I haven't seen too many Aussie golds lately. I haven't seen too many Aussie corals around much either. But yeah, the price of torches is coming down slowly because, they're LPS, so they take a little bit longer to catch up. But when you take one frag of tenuous and you plop it in the ocean, grow it into a mini colony in like 6 months, now you got like 50 branches to start brand new colonies. Yeah, it's a matter of time before we're all buying tenuous colonies, and I'm here for it. I am here for it because tenuous is a tough acro. It's got great polyps, huge diversity. I'm just not paying stupid money for those frags. That's another thing I saw going through all these different vendors. I didn't really see too many tenuous colonies yet. But the tenuous were just like crazy price per branch. Some goofy made up names over and over and over again. And then on the same page, there'd be like a fully encrusted mini colony of, just kind of smooth skin, kind of granulosa with a little bit of potential. And the frags were like $40. Like, why would I spend $300 on this tiny little thing that is going to stress me out when I could buy 2 or 3 of these other corals and hope that, 2 of them really, really thrive. So we're starting to see, the suppliers catching up with the massive demand for the torches and the tenuous. And I'm really excited about it because I know I'm going to keep pushing the needle for deep water acros. I don't care if the frags start costing crazy money because at the end of the day, or at the end of 5 or 10 years, we're going to have this huge variety of smooth skinned acros. And I really hope that's the next trend. I really should show off more of mine to help that along. But I keep talking about a reef therapy every chance I get. And, I'm hoping that once the tenuous and torch craze dies out, that something else rises in its place, so we can just see this huge variety and this huge diversity of some other group of coral. I'm excited about it.
Well, and I'm a hypocrite because I'm wearing an acro T-shirt, but haven't really been I mean, I keep a couple of acros, but I just haven't been, I must have an SPS dominant tank. It's just, nah. But we've got such killer flow pumps now compared to back in the day. There, I used it again. We should start a drinking game when
Number 5.
every time we say it's back in the day, take a sip. No, but man, give me some of those Reef crest acros, gems, humulus, like just big, chunky acros. But you don't really see those anymore. Right?
I got them. I got the
know
rainbow.
you do,
I got the green. I got the Digitifera, Monticulosa. What I don't have is the corn cob style with the really fat tip.
Yeah.
I have a couple of colonies that have like the potential to show that off. But if I blasted the tank like I want to, it would bleach the other acros. So I recently got a whole suite of new Japanese spotlights. The Vital Wave 2 by, I think it's a collab between Ecolamps and Blue Harbor. And they have Bluetooth built in. So when I plug them into just like a regular socket, I'll be able to program them directly instead of having something else control them. But there's one that is really heavy on the 400 nanometer, 420 nanometer, and a touch of 450 to really bring out the blues. Oh my God, IG Myron, he started, I don't know if it's still going, on 1.023 World, but I've always kind of considered him like the Japanese Jake Adams, really like diving deep into spectrum. He's been involved with the design of a lot of these Ecolamps lights, and he's just such a nerd. And I sent him some pictures of some of my blue acros, and he was giving me a little slack. He's all like, oh, that is blue chromoprotein, but if you add more 400, 420 nanometer with this light, you'll get more blue fluorescent protein. And I'm like, okay. they're blue as blue can be, but he was basically just throwing a little shade on the Radeon G4 for not having enough 400 to 430 near UV light to bring out the blue fluorescent protein. And I know that I have both, but it got me thinking like, all right, challenge accepted. I'm going to take one of those Vital Wave 2s with just that and just plop it right over one of my humulus acros, which is like right under the outflow of the closed loop pump with the clover nozzle, just crazy flow. Let me just say, man, we really cleaned up the tanks leading up to reef stock, and I'm dialing in my nitrate dosing on the main system more and adding a certain thing of trace, and I got Acropower dosing. Oh my God, my corals have just never looked better right now.
Yeah,
the only corals that Yeah. So nice. I feel a little bit bad because your frag of Hoaxami is not in that tank. It's another kind of, I call it the highlight tank. With the Acro system, I call the very highlight tank. And so it looks good, but it's nothing like what the Hoaxami is doing in the main Acro system, just exploding in tips. And I don't know, it's kind of turned a corner in that system where it just really tuning things up just right. Meanwhile, my Red Sea tank is too clean, and I've been pounding it with food, and all of a sudden I'm hitting it with nitrates because my Suharsenoi and my Carduus and a few of the dragons, they're a little too pale for the light and the corals around them. All the Montes are fine, the highlight acros are fine, but the deep waters are just like, they're missing something. They just need a little extra oomph. So, but yeah, most of the corals are just doing so freaking good, man. I'm trying to. It's actually a time consuming to sit down and enjoy them all. If that makes sense.
I think that's probably. This is more of a aha moment, but I got tired of SPS. For a while there. I mean, it was, I don't know, they were cool, but I got over it for a bit. But I wonder if part of that is just my interaction with the reef keeping world is everything online, right? Mostly. And to your point, the SPS zone kind of went into a niche, right? Especially with tenuous and those kind of corals. And I remember when I visited you and the studio, and all of a sudden I saw these old familiar faces of, Acropora gemifera, humulus, stags, like really big stags. And I left that day. I told you, I was like, crap, now I'm going to have this urge to set up an SPS tank again. And I mean, I just did a search for Gemifera. I'm on page 3 of Google, and it's all scientific articles. There's not anything for sale. And it's just a bummer.
Well, so I think I have a couple really cool strains of, I think they're humulus and not fully grown out, but battle corals. Adam over there, he's got some cool strain, and there's a blue one that's actually grown pretty well for me, and there's a rainbowy one. You know, it's not rainbow, but it's got hints of blue and green and red, a little bit of red, and that one hasn't grown nearly as fast as the blue. They came in at the exact same size. The blue is already graduated to its own little mini tile, and it's out with the colonies, whereas the rainbowy one is still sitting there kind of looking at me. But I think some of those corals, they deserve to go from the high light to the very high light tank.
Yeah, there was right when the bulletin board, when the forums started to take shape, but you still had like bulletin boards. I remember seeing a picture of a guy's 180. He had a pale blue background, and he had 2 Carlson surge devices on opposite ends of the tank, and the tank was lit with just Iwasaki's, right? And he just had those reef crest, just dense acros in every color. And I remember how old was I? Probably 20 or something. I was blown away by that picture, you know, and I have to admit the fluorescent acro tanks that I see now that are all tightly grown, small branch, you know, type of stuff, just doesn't do it for me. I don't know.
It's not the inspiration. If a blue tip brown staghorn was the last coral I got to grow, if it was the last coral on Earth, I'd be so happy with that. I'd be, satisfied. I'd be satisfied with that, you know? So yeah, it's kind of fun.
And we never mastered those corals, right? So we're all challenging ourselves, and we all are looking for the next thing to figure out. I don't know about you. I struggled, but I mean, I was dealing with shitty pumps, but Maxijets back in the day and everything else. But doing a good job with like a humulus or a Gemifera, like that's a different ball game. Like I'll take the tenuous challenge over that any day, you know. So
this is a perfect segue into the next 2 tanks that I want to do. I'll get the easy one out of the way first. I figured out that my next nano reef concept, I want to do like a 5 to 10 gallon tank, totally stock, black sand, and as many walking dendros as I can get my hands on, and like virtually nothing else. So if anybody listening or watching right now, if you know of a good source for some heterosamia or heterocochlea walking dendros, you hit me up, because I think that would be super duper cool. I got an actual dendro at Reef Stock, and I found a perfect spot for it next to my ball tentacle anemone in the anemone system in the sump. But it's right near the front glass, so it gets ambient light, no direct light, and it's kind of hanging off it's like, you know, on the side. I kind of magnetized it and put it around one of the baffles with another coral on the other side. And it's just fuzzy all the time. Nothing can sting it. Yeah, I can feed it all the food I want, and what it doesn't eat kind of blows into the ball tentacle. And then what that doesn't eat, I literally push it into the pump to feed all the anemones. And my overflow coral tank, which is full now. I got room for like 3 or 4 more corals. I'm like using magnets to put stuff on the back. I'm like, oh God, I got to get rid of, you know, some of these extra frags. But I don't know if I've mentioned this, but the 400 gallon tank is flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm using a 60 breeder. It's flowing. I got it rocked up. I actually love the way it looks. I think I mentioned it looks goofy. I got a Biz.
Oh, that's right. We talked about Aquascape. Yeah.
I got the Biz 150 right before Reef Stock, and oh my goodness, I might have to give that back. Like there's a lot of power for that tank, and that will be the first time in my career where I'm like, this is too much horsepower. It's amazing. It's an amazing machine, and I'll cry if I come to that conclusion, but that is my challenge between now and the next 11 and a half months is I have all the corals. I have the Gemmiferas, I have big torts, I have, a few plating acros, a semi-plating acro, the hoaxami, all these staghorns. So my challenge now is like, I have no problem putting them in the tank and growing them, but it's going to be a real, an exercise of patience, because I want to pass them through a quarantine tank. I don't know if I've already mentioned this, but I'm going to put a 60 breeder or 60 cube in line with the system. I'm going to feed all the water through UV sterilizer, so a real slow rate. So anything potentially coming from the system will be zapped. Cut off all the bases, and just dip and observe. They don't have any pests. They don't have any parasites. I just want to make sure I'm going to just go to a pathological degree of really exterminating any potential for sponges, because a 400-gallon tank, man, I don't want to get in there and like deal with any sponges. Sponges are cool, but they're a problem with my source water. And I don't want to ever see Valonia, Bryopsis, Aptasia. Like, I promise you, there will never be an imaginary piece of Aptasia DNA in that tank. Like, it's going to be a little stressful for about a year, being very diligent about what I put in that tank. So I have all the corals. I'm going to create that reef apex balmy crest scene,
Yes.
And it's going to be fun. But what I'm really excited about is going out to Atlanta here in a couple weeks. So Raj, if you're listening, he's not listening, he's too busy, but he's going to show me a couple things, and that's when I'll be able to talk to him about a nice custom sub. But I already got the calcium reactor, I already got the return pump, I already got the protein skimmer. The lights will be easy. Like I said, I'm probably going to build one side at a time. So it's an 8-foot tank. It's got 2 braces. So I'll build the 2.5 feet with the staghorns first, and then the other 2.5 feet in the middle with the tables and stuff, and then all the digitate and corymbos corals on the left side last. So yeah, hopefully I can create that inspiration for really growing the corals to the size where you can really appreciate more than just the color and the branch, but the overall colony shape. That's going to be my masterpiece, actually. It's maybe my masterpiece for a while, besides the entire studio. But yeah, hopefully that'll be fun.
That sounds good, man. I'm hoping to come out there in June. Or I said
yes,
hoping.
Sir.
I already bought the damn ticket, so I will be out in June. But yeah, so I'd love to see where you're at with that. It'd be kind of fun. I'm sure it'll still be a work in progress.
So I'll see you in a couple of weeks, and then you'll see me in a couple months, and then maybe you'll go to Macna in Wisconsin.
Maybe.
Is that in the cards? And then you'll come out for Reef Stock in February. So yeah, you won't be no stranger. We got to do some fun live recordings. But I hope the listeners have really enjoyed this slow boil of reef therapy. I think we covered a whole bunch of topics. I want to thank everybody who's actually supported the Reef Builder channel. We just cracked 100,000 subscribers.
Cheers to that.
It is a point of cheers to that. It is a point of pride, but that was never my goal. My goal was always to create good, fun, engaging content, the likes of which I would enjoy consuming. And that's exactly the goal of Mark and I. It's just sharing some ideas, broadening the conversation, and really giving you guys some meat and some bones to chew on as you're working or playing or thinking about your reef tank. And well, thank everybody for supporting the Reef Therapy side of our content media stream. So if you're listening to this on your favorite podcatcher, make sure to like and review us, rate us. I think that's how we do it. And then on YouTube, let us know what you guys think of this session. Definitely want to know how people are doing with the fish. If anybody knows where some oddball corals are, some walking dendros, hit us up in the comments. And I think that's going to do it for this week.
Yeah, I think we, I don't know how long we went on this one. We probably went away. I was worried this would be short because I felt like the bullet points that I thought were worth discussing were all relatively short, and here we go again, right? So
yeah, no, we can freestyle like no other. But thanks a lot for another great session of Reef Therapy, Mark, and I'll see you next week, and then in 2 weeks we'll sit down and talk about your tank.
Sounds good, man. I'm looking forward to hosting you. So,
all right.
Be good.
Later, everyone.